This guy gets yanked into a whole different world to save a broke kingdom. He is made king and handed a princess. But instead of fighting with swords, he fights with 200 IQ moves, budget cutting, and farming upgrades. Low-key the sigma of nation building. The series begins with Kazuya's grandfather, his only living relative, giving him life advice. He tells Kazuya to start a family of his own so he doesn't get lonely when he passes away and to always keep them safe. After his grandfather journeys to the afterlife, Kazuya leads a pretty boring life. In the Elfrieden Kingdom, King Albert is worried about the state of things in the country. They're in a deep mess and he asks his officials what they should do. Marx, his right-hand man and prime minister, suggests summoning a hero. Meanwhile, Kazuya is in the library studying for his civil service exams. The head priest of Elfrieden, along with other priests, performs a hero summoning ritual, casting a spell over the kingdom. Kazuya, minding his business in the library, gets summoned. The ground beneath him opens up and he falls through, leaving his books scattered on the floor. Kazuya finds himself falling towards Elfrieden and he eventually lands in the summoning room. He opens his eyes to see the priest staring down at him. They too are surprised. The summoning actually worked. Kazuya is taken before Albert, who receives him happily. But Kazuya is in a foul mood. I mean, who wouldn't? After getting summoned against your own will and not even given a soft landing, Kazuya asks Albert to explain the situation, and Albert tells him about their continent, Landia, which is home to many races. However, 10 years ago, in the northern reaches of the continent, a rift appeared which is presently known as the Demon Realm. A bunch of monsters emerged from it and started terrorizing the northern counties. Various nations united together to try and fight them off, but the demons were stronger and they failed. Their little defense strategy cost them a lot of military resources, so they no longer had the strength to fight against the monsters from the Demon Realm, and the Demon Realm's forces were able to take up a third of the continent. The Demon Lord pulled a domain expansion. Kazuya hopes they aren't planning to send him to defeat the monsters. That would be the only logical reason for summoning him, but Marx tells him something even more ridiculous. They're going to turn him over to the Grand Chaos Empire in place of financial aid. Albert apologizes to Kazuya. They have no other choice. The Grand Chaos Empire is the nation that borders the Demon Lord's domain, making them primarily responsible for defending the other nations. Because of this, the Grand Chaos seeks financial assistance from the other nations, but Elfrieden is too broke to even afford food for its population, let alone send money to another nation. Marx explains that the Demon Realm's invasion has caused some people who lost their nation to flee to the Elfrieden Kingdom, and it's costing too much to handle the refugees. And the Grand Chaos Empire also accepts a hero in place of tribute. At this point, Kazuya sees red. He questions whether they would sell off their daughters to pay their debts. After taking a deep breath to calm down, he asks what his fate will be once they hand him over. The king tries to explain, and Elisha, Albert's wife, joins them. From all they tell Kazuya, he realizes he's stuck there. He thinks of ways to escape, but knows it's basically useless trying to escape, because it could be bad for him if he gets caught. Being the smart he is, he realizes his life depends on his next response. Kazuya then questions Albert if the request for financial assistance from the Empire is a one-time thing, and according to Marx, it isn't. He figures they'll keep requesting more as long as the monsters keep attacking. Kazuya realizes he's the only hope the Elfrieden Kingdom has. He then suggests they develop the country's finances and adopt policies to build up enough national strength so they can push back against those requests, sounding like a true hero while being a bit dramatic. He is making sense, so Albert decides to hear him out. They sit down to talk, and Kazuya requests detailed information about the country's finances. They end up discussing a lot of things for 3 days straight. Kazuya ends up looking 3 times his age due to lack of sleep. Albert gathers everyone and announces that he has handed over the throne to Kazuya. This comes as a shock to everyone, including Kazuya. Albert also announces Kazuya's engagement to Lycia, his daughter. Bro saw an opportunity to have a hard-working son-in-law and quickly took it. The news spreads to the other kingdoms, and everyone has different reactions, but they are all surprised. Meanwhile, a girl rides on her horse heading to Elfrieden like her life depends on it. Albert is getting his ear cleaned by Elisha. This dude was tired of all the responsibility, no cap. He's enjoying himself a little too much. The girl, Lycia, barges in on them. Lycia scolds Albert for giving up the throne. She was worried something bad had happened to him, not knowing he saw an opportunity to escape responsibility. It's a surprise he didn't leave to buy milk when she was born, since he majors in responsibility dipping. Albert tells Lycia he is convinced Kazuya is fit to rule the country better than he is. He also tells her that her engagement to Kazuya can be broken off if she doesn't agree to it. Elisha tells her to meet with Kazuya first and then make her decision. Lycia goes to meet Kazuya. When she enters the office, he's buried in a lot of work. He doesn't even have the energy to hold a conversation and asks if Lycia can read. She agrees and he tests her a bit, and when she does well, he asks her to help him with some work. Lycia makes it clear to him that she's the daughter of Albert. Kazuya is surprised she's a princess because she isn't dressed like one. Lycia tells him she is stationed with the army commander and was out on duty but had to return home because of the news. Kazuya introduces himself too. Lycia accuses Kazuya of stealing the throne and stripping her of her princess title, but Kazuya tells her that her father dumped his throne on him. Lycia requests to know the whole story. Kazuya doesn't even understand how he came to be king and tells her he was just looking out for his own safety. Meanwhile, Albert wonders if Kazuya and Lycia would get along, and Elisha assures him that they'll be fine. Kazuya and Lycia sit to talk. Kazuya explains the situation to Lycia, who then apologizes for misunderstanding. Kazuya then tells her that she doesn't have to follow through with their engagement, as he's just keeping the throne warm until the country is doing better to avoid being handed over to the Empire. Lycia, upset, questions if he can fix the country within a short amount of time and what he plans to do about the aid to the Empire. Kazuya tells her he already has the aid money. At the Principality of Amadonia, Roroa has purchased some jewelry from Elfrieden, and Sebastian comments that the new king is taking a bold move to sell the country's treasures. Roroa knows he may be a force to be reckoned with, as he seems smart enough to know the necessary measures to take. Back in Elfrieden, Licia is shocked to hear that Kazuya sold their national treasure, but he explains to her that he grouped them and only sold off the less important ones. He knows that the important ones would bring more money as a museum exhibit than they'll do if they were sold. Meanwhile, Excel sends a spy, Canaria, to find out what's happening in Elfrieden and to check how capable the new king is. Licia is still upset about Kazuya selling off the national treasure and asks if he has already sent the money, but he hasn't. He plans on holding out until the very last day. Licia suggests they use the money to improve their military instead, so they'll be able to defend the country. But Kazuya knows it's a bad idea and disagrees. He says if they don't solve the food situation, they'll lose the support of the people. Licia defends the people's loyalty, but Kazuya knows how people can revolt when they're hungry. Licia realizes Kazuya is a realist. The world Kazuya was summoned to is filled with magic and fantastical creatures but lacking in technological advancement. Marx informs Kazuya that he may have gained magical powers upon arriving in this world, so they decide to test this. Kazuya is supposed to touch a mysterious statue and see if his mind's eye gets a magical PowerPoint presentation of his abilities. Upon touching the statue, Kazuya is immediately assaulted by a hurricane of colorful orbs so bright they could make a rave jealous. Turns out, he had magic all right. What kind of magic? That part was still a mystery. Licia makes her way to Kazuya's office, and when she enters, she is surprised to see a bunch of people seriously working. She walks over to Kazuya's desk and is even more surprised to see that he's using magic to move quills. Kazuya explains that his ability allows him to project his consciousness into objects. Licia calls his magic weird, and Kazuya agrees. He tells her that he can only control 3 objects, max, and his range isn't great either. Kazuya adds that his power is useful for doing paperwork. Licia then asks why there are so many people in the office, and Kazuya explains they are investigating potential embezzlement. If any are found, they plan to ask for reimbursement. Licia thinks he's doing too much since he has already secured money to pay the tribute, but Kazuya says they don't have enough to get the country's economy back on track. Licia decides to help him with some paperwork. Later, Kazuya is still working and notices that everyone else has fallen asleep. He goes over to Licia to check on her and gently moves her hair from her face. This wakes Licia up. She's startled to see him close by, and there's an awkward interaction between them. Kazuya then tells Licia that he wants to show her something. They mount a horse and begin their journey. During the ride, Licia takes the opportunity to ask Kazuya if he has a family or a girlfriend back in his world, but he replies that he does not and that this is why he isn't in a rush to return. They arrive at a cotton field. Kazuya explains that focusing on cotton production instead of food, because cotton was once in high demand, has negatively impacted the country's food self-sufficiency and affected the country's economy. Licia, unaware of this situation before, feels guilty and considers herself a failure of a leader. Kazuya reassures her that she can learn about everything with time. Licia realizes that Kazuya is showing her this because when he leaves, she will be responsible for leading the country. During lunch, Kazuya suggests some measures they could take to increase food availability in the country. Licia zones out, and Kazuya calls her attention back to the conversation. She points out that, as king, he shouldn't be eating where everyone else is, as the guards are watching him. Kazuya explains that they are economizing the castle, and that extravagant means would be wasteful. Just then, Ludwin, captain of the royal guard, joins them. Licia introduces him to Kazuya, and Ludwin asks to join them, which Kazuya accepts. After settling down, Ludwin asks Kazuya if his plans are going on smoothly, but Kazuya tells him they aren't, and blames it on the staff. He says that aside from Marx, every other person is useless. He says they're the reason the kingdom ended up in its current state, and states that he's looking for someone willing to do all he tells them. Later, during tea time, Kazuya considers using the Crystal Cast, the kingdom's magical broadcasting system, as a means to recruit people. The Crystal Cast is usually used for New Year greetings from the previous king and for sharing important information. Kazuya then asks Licia how the country used to recruit people, and she explains it was based on connections. Kazuya scolds her for this nepotism, saying that there are many talented individuals left undiscovered. When Licia questions what kind of people he plans to recruit, Kazuya says he'll figure out what to say when the time comes, and he'll borrow the words of a famous hero, Cao Cao, who laid the foundation for a particular nation and was so dedicated to gathering skilled men under his command. He had a passion for searching for talent. Kazuya delivers a great speech to the people, urging those with talent to come forth and dissing the previous king too. Everyone watches him intently. Kazuya adds that it doesn't matter how useless anyone thinks their talent is, he's going to be the judge of that. This speaks to Pancho, who is also in the crowd. Kazuya also promises rewards to those whose skills are deemed useful for the country, as a way to motivate people to participate, and it works. However, Licia can only facepalm, probably wondering how he plans to fund these rewards when the country is poor. Kazuma concludes that people can either recommend themselves or refer others, and they will receive a percentage of the reward. Once the broadcast ends, Licia just stares at him in disbelief, while Kazuya fantasizes about finding the good people he is looking for. Licia dreams of her time with Kazuya in the cotton field. She wakes up, recalling that Kazuya mentioned she could break off their engagement. However, she knows the country really needs him and wonders if he would stay if she decides to marry him. Just then, there's a knock on Licia's door, startling her. Her maid, Serena, enters and notices the flush on Licia's face. She chuckles a bit and hands Licia her clothes, reminding her that it's the day Kazuya will honor those who stood out among those he recruited. Licia dresses while discussing the event with Serena. In the waiting room, Pancho is panicking. Akuya approaches him and asks what's wrong. Pancho admits he's nervous about standing before the king and doesn't think his talent is worth it. The Crystal Cast is in the throne room. Everyone watches as the final contestants stand before Kazuya, and all the other contestants bow to him, except for Aisha, a dark elf. When Lumen tells her to bow, she replies that it's not her tribe's custom, as they only bow to their master. Kazuya has no problem with it and stops Lumen from making a big deal out of it, and even asks the others who bowed to stand up. Marx goes ahead to announce the talents of the final contestants before Kazuya. The first is Aisha, who steps forward forward. With his powers, Kazuya reads more information about her tribe. He feels proud of his abilities. Marks continues that Aisha is really good in combat and her ability is the best in the kingdom. Aisha, with trust issues, asks if she's really going to get rewarded, and Kazuya confirms. She tells him she'll forgo the reward in exchange for his help. Lumen reacts, but Kazuya is quick to stop him. This dude hates Aisha's audacity. He'll probably jump her in the streets, but she'll body him. Kazuya wants to hear her request. Aisha explains that in the sacred forest where she's from, their trees are thinning as there's no new growth. Kazuya thinks for a bit, then questions whether they're thinning the forest properly. He suggests they should remove bigger trees to give room for new growth. Aisha is confused, so he explains everything in layman's terms while acting like some type of god. All this is new to Aisha, but it sounds like a pretty good solution, so she immediately falls to her knees, pledging her loyalty to Kazuya. Aisha begs him to come to her forest and help them, and Kazuya agrees. Meanwhile, Excel receives a letter delivered by a bird. It is information from her spy. Back at the castle, the next contestant called forward is Juna, who possesses a great singing voice and a body that makes Kazuya forget his line, causing Lycia to be jealous. Juna comes from a line of sirens. Kazuya requests to hear her sing. He asks for a song that'll inspire the people, but she doesn't know any uplifting songs. However, she states that she can sing one right away if she hears it. Kazuya pulls out his phone, surprising everyone, and plays music for her to listen to. After the song ends, Kazuya takes back his AirPod, causing Juna to blush, while Lycia watches them closely. Surprisingly, Juna has memorized the song just after listening to it once. She then begins to sing. Her voice echoes through the whole city, and everyone watches her interestingly. After she's done, she receives cheers and applause. Kazuya praises her voice, and she tells him of her desire to learn more songs from his homeland. In Amadonia, Roroa is reading a letter when Sebastian interrupts her. He asks if there's any news she has gathered from all the reading, and she tells him all about what Kazuya has been up to, the new recruiting process and all. She adds that when someone is truly gifted, they'll be the one judging their employer instead, which is exactly what Hakuya is doing. He is assessing Kazuya and how he handles the other contestants, and most importantly, how he handle Pancho. The next person to be called up is Pancho. As he steps forward, he trips and falls. Bro loses 1,000 aura and drags his whole generation down with him. After getting up and putting himself together, Marks informs Kazuya about Pancho's talent, gluttony. He has traveled the world sampling different food in every region and claims to have eaten everything there is to eat. Pancho is embarrassed as his talent is being announced, but to his surprise, Kazuya is impressed. Pancho is exactly what he's been looking for. He takes Pancho's hands and thanks him for participating, saying he's happy to have him on board. Pancho is moved to tears. According to him, everyone mocks his talent and calls him foolish for spending his money on food. Kazuya encourages him, saying his gluttony is what will save the country. Pancho promises to use his knowledge for the benefit of the kingdom. Kazuya even renames Pancho after a food advocate from his homeland, Ishizuka. The next contestant is Hakuya, who is a referral. He is highly intelligent and his knowledge and memory are unmatched in the kingdom. When Kazuya questions him about his referral, he says it's his uncle who was tired of seeing him sitting around reading books and said he should become a productive member of society. Kazuya relates to this. He, too, is a bookworm. Kazuya then offers him a job as a librarian, but Hakuya rejects it. Although that was his initial interest, after seeing how wise Kazuya is, he requests to become Kazuya's military strategist instead. Kazuya questions why he changed his mind, and he confesses that he had been sizing up Kazuya, and his test was whether or not Kazuya would accept Pancho. Kazuya now wonders if Hakuya is the kind of person he's looking for. In response, Hakuya suggests that Kazuya can judge for himself. Kazuya agrees and invites him to visit his chamber later, where he will determine Hakuya's talents. Eventually, Hakuya would get hired and become known as the Prime Minister in Black, because that evening, he and Kazuya would have a long conversation where Kazuya would realize how wise Hakuya is. The last contestant to be called up is Tomoe of the Mystic Wolves, a refugee. She appears very timid as she stands before Kazuya. Her talent? To communicate with birds and beasts. Kazuya reads about her tribe and asks Lycia about it, which she confirms. He then wonders how to make use of her talent. Tomoe calls Kazuya's attention and tells him she has something to share. He encourages her to speak, but her voice is barely audible, making him go down to her. Kazuya reassures her that she doesn't have to speak loudly and that she can share comfortably. However, the information she reveals comes as a shock to him. Kazuya asks Tomoe who else knows the information she just shared with him, and she replies that it's just her mother. Kazuya tries to keep his cool and walks back to his seat without showing any reaction. He instructs Marks to determine how best to utilize Tomoe's ability. The event comes to an end with Kazuya appreciating the contestants. Tomoe is taken to Kazuya's office, where Kazuya, Lycia, Marks, and Lumen are present. Kazuya asks if anyone overheard what Tomoe whispered to him, but they didn't. He then reveals that Tomoe said she used her power to communicate with a demon. So, the group is taken aback. The Demon Lord's monsters are different from the usual monsters in this world. They behave as humans and have intelligence. However, they have a separate language, making them unable to communicate with humans. Tomoe explains that she was in the mountains gathering food when she encountered a demon. She cried out for help, and the demon asked if she could understand it. Tomoe believes the demon was a scout. She adds that the demon said it could not bear to watch someone with the same scent as itself be unalived and told her to run. Kazuya knows that having the ability to communicate with demons could dramatically change their situation, either for better or worse. Lycia thinks Kazuya means they can negotiate with the demons and take back their land, but Kazuya says that if other nations discover they can communicate with demons, they may turn against them. While Lycia is in denial, Lumen and Mark know there's a possibility. Tomoe approaches Lycia and takes her hand. The atmosphere in the room becomes sad, and Kazuya tries to lighten the mood by saying that it's just one possible outcome. He adds that they need to be careful about the information. He promises Tomoe that the kingdom will keep her safe, as she's really important and could turn around the relationship between humans and demons. Initially, he considers assigning a royal guard to her, but Marks points out that it might only attract more attention and suggests that Kazuya adopt her. Kazuya is pleased agrees that adoption is an option, but Marx bursts his bubble by saying it would only be possible if Kazuya is married. Alicia is against the idea, so Marx suggests that Kazuya take Tomoe as a secondary consort. Kazuya dislikes this option as Tomoe is too young and questions whether the previous king can take her. Marx says it is possible. Lucia supports the idea, saying she always wanted a little sister and she gives Tomoe a hug. However, Tomoe is against it, stating that she already has a mother and a brother. Kazuya tells her that if she is adopted, her mother and brother can come stay in the castle too. Tomoe agrees. Kazuya tells Marx to let some time pass before the adoption so it won't be Sue's. He also asks what position they can give Tomoe in the meantime so she can stay in the palace. Marx suggests putting her in charge of the horses for Kazuya's carriage, which Tomoe is okay with. Later, Kazuya is in Lisha's room making a doll, but she has a problem with him being there. Kazuya explains that he needed a relaxing environment. Lisha suggests he ask her father to give up his room, but Kazuya believes it's better for him to sleep in the office due to the ongoing crises. He asks about Tomoe, and Lisha tells him she is doing great. Just then, Serena enters and, upon seeing Kazuya in the room, gives Lisha a knowing look and giggles as she steps back out. Lisha shouts that it's not what Serena thinks. Later, Serena serves them tea and informs them that Pancho has returned. Kazuya is excited and pulls Lisha to go with him. They meet Pancho, who has just returned from his travels with a lot of food. Kazuya lent him a hero's sack, which can hold a lot of food. Licia asks why he needs so much food, and Kazuya replies that he hopes to spice things up in the kingdom. The next day, they broadcast a cooking show for the kingdom. Juna and Pancho are the hosts, but Pancho is really nervous. They call on Kazuya to address the people as well. He informs everyone that the broadcast is a temporary solution and that they will be introducing foods that the kingdom is not used to and showing them how to prepare it. There is also a panel of tasters to review the food. The first dish presented disgusts everyone, but Kazuya puts on his apron like a pro. Let him cook. He prepares the food, but the tasters are too scared to try it. Lucia takes the first bite and says it's delicious, which makes the others try it too. They enjoy it, and Aisha can't stop eating. The next food item is displayed, tree roots. Kazuya once again displays his chef skills and prepares the food. Everyone enjoys it, while Aisha, the foodie, can't get enough, and even her people back home can see she's having a good time. The next food catches everyone off guard. It's fried roaches. While Aisha and Lisha hesitate to eat it, Tomo has already stomached a few and comments on how nice they taste, saying it reminds her of home. Pancho did use an ingredient that is commonly used by Tomoe's tribe. Kazuya tries it as well and is moved to tears as the ingredient also reminds him of home. The next food item is more surprising than the previous ones. It's the creature Jilin, and the tester panel is in shock. Pancho begins preparing it while Tomoe asks if it is edible. Pancho assures her that it is and that the Gelin is dead. They find it a bit sus because Gelins are very fragile. If you cut into them, their bodily fluids spill out, making it impossible for their lifeless bodies to appear as neat as the one Pancho has. Pancho explains that they can achieve a clean carcass by striking the Gelin just the right amount, not too hard. After he's done cooking, he serves everyone. Kazuya comments that the Jilin looks like udon noodles, and because of that, Licia suggests that he eat it first since it's kind of familiar to him. Juna hands him his share, and since the others had to try unfamiliar foods, Kazuya has no choice but to try it too. With newfound courage, Kazuya takes a bite and it's good. Aisha joins Kazuya, and soon the others join in to try the food as well. They all find it delicious. As the program concludes, Kazuya encourages everyone to demand another part if they want one. A week later, Kazuya is munching on fried roaches while complaining about the tons of demands they've received. Just then, Serena comes to inform him that Marx is there and wishes to discuss something important. Marx tells Kazuya that he intends to resign and recommends Hakuya as his replacement. Kazuya agrees and says they will make it official another day. Marx is relieved and mentions his plans of buying a house with his retirement allowance. Kazuya simply stares at him with the, "You know the country is too broke to fund all that." Marx understands immediately and decides to continue working. At least he'll keep getting his salary. Kazuya reminds Marx that he is still useful to him since he is not really familiar with the rules and customs of the kingdom. He then asks Marx to stay a little longer, and Marx agrees. Hakuya humbly makes a suggestion as the new prime minister. He tells Kazuya to take some time off. He believes this would help not only Kazuya but also his subordinates to take a break. Kazuya goes to find Licia while thinking of Hakuya's suggestion. Hakuya's had asked Kazuya to go on a date with Licia during his day off, and that he shouldn't just stay indoors so that his underlings would see that he's taking a break. When Kazuya worries about their escort, Hakuya reminds him of Aisha. When Kazuya finally finds Lisha, he sees that she is training with Aisha and they seem to have equal strength. Kazuya stops them, afraid they'll destroy the castle. They then sit down to talk and he tells them about Hakuya's idea, their game. Aisha suggests they visit her forest while at it, but Kazuya promises to do that some other time, explaining that he is only free for a day and that the trip to her village would take several days. They all dress up in military academy uniforms. Kazuya compliments Licia but tells Aisha that the uniform doesn't suit her as it doesn't match his image of dark elves. Licia disagrees with Kazuya, making Aisha hug her. On their way to their destination, Kazuya reminds Aisha that when they get into town, she should address him by his name and not refer to him as king. Once they arrive in town, they visit a few places and then sit for a while until Aisha mentions she is hungry. Then they go to a restaurant where Juna works. When they enter, Juna wants to refer to him as king, but he is quick to interrupt her and remind her that he's the son of a silk crepe dealer. Juna is smart enough to understand that he doesn't want anyone to know his identity and plays along. She serves them Gelin udon and tells them that it's the most requested dish in the restaurant. Based on Juna and Kazuya's interaction, Licia questions why Kazuya treats Juna differently. He responds that he gets nervous talking to a pretty lady. Juna comments that Aisha seems a bit different from the image she had of her when they were in the castle. Kazuya adds that Aisha is trying to beat Pancho at the gluttony game. Aisha then questions if that's the reason Kazuya refuses to take her into his bed. Kazuya is surprised but says that he's already already engaged. Lisha tells him that polygamy is allowed in the kingdom, and Juna adds that women can also have multiple husbands. Kazuya wonders why Lisha's father has just one wife, and Lisha explains that her mother is the daughter of the previous king. Her father married into the family, which is why he never sought another wife. Kazuya then asks Lisha if she would be okay with him taking other wives. She responds that she is actually willing to allow a maximum of 8 women, so she can at least have him to herself for a day, considering there are 8 days in a week in this world. The kingdom was formed when the races decided to join together, naming a human their leader based on the race being the most populous. To protect the rights of the races, the top leaders from each of the 3 armed forces were chosen. From a quick assessment, Kazuya sees that the 3 dukes' forces joined together outmatched the royal troops. An arrangement established for dealing with any bad ruler who poses a threat to the races, allowing the 3 dukes to join forces and overthrow him, or so it seems. However, Kazuya feels that a decision body with multiple systems would have many disadvantages for the state, but the dukes haven't responded to him even as he has reached out to them on the issue. The 2 strangers argue while Kazuya, Lissia, and Aisha watch from their spot. It seems like a debate. Halbert, the guy with hair that screams, "Dollar store shampoo! Seriously, how else do you go Super Saiyan with just a few strands?" seems to have some loyalty for Duke Carmine and the Mystic Fox, and Kaeda tries to show him the cons. She points out how Carmine has been acting out of sorts lately, explaining that fighting internally would only benefit outside nations, the Principality of Amadonia precisely, which seeks to take back the land that was taken by Elfrieden years back, same as the Republic of Turgis, who, due to having most of its lands frozen, seek good and rich lands. Kaeda states that going into a civil war would risk an invasion. As Kazuya listens, he remembers getting an overview of the surrounding nations of the kingdom from Hakuya. With no friendly nations, there are 4 neutral nations and 1 hostile nation. Turgis bears no hostility toward Elfrieden, but might support Amadonia if asked. They seek an opportunity to take over and move to Elfrieden, which would benefit them, but without such an opening, Elfrieden is safe. Amadonia sent an offer to support Kazuya against the 3 dukes, but both Kazuya and Hakuya can tell that their intentions aren't genuine. They also highly suspect that Amadonia has made the same offer to the dukes, and hope that the 3 dukes wouldn't fall for it. Kaeda continues to strongly prove her point when Kazuya cuts in. She doesn't recognize who he is for a bit and is stunned when it dawns on her. Kaeda and Halbert are now seated before the king, and while Kaeda pleads for mercy on behalf of Halbert for the rebellious things he said during their argument, Halbert still has no idea who Kazuya is. He starts questioning who Kazuya is and why he is butting into their business. He's done it when he yells at Kaeda, who was trying to stop his insulting outburst. Kazuya confronts him about that, still calmly, but Halbert steps up his insolence by attempting to reach out and grab Kazuya. Aisha bundles the dude easily, like a paperweight, grappling him till Kazuya gives the order to let go. To be fair, he's lucky Aisha got to him before Juna did. After wincing through the pain, Halbert angrily asks who Kazuya is. Like a moment Kazuya has been waiting for, he plays cool, allowing Halbert to figure it out. Halbert freaks out on recognizing Kazuya. He stutters when Kazuya asks if he is really planning to support Carmine. Kazuya mentions that he has no intention of stopping him, as he has the right to choose. However, Kazuya adds that Halbert would be fighting on opposite sides with Kaeda. Considering they are childhood friends, Kazuya points out what is at stake in being on opposing sides with Kaeda. They are solid points, and reflecting on them for a bit, it seems like Halbert's mindset has been reset. Kazuya, Lissia, and Aisha are out at a park, and Aisha is deep in sleep, while Kazuya and Lissia just talk. Lissia asks Kazuya if he would like to lay his head on her lap, and Kazuya is stunned at first but complies. Lissia is a lot different from when she first met Kazuya and wouldn't mind getting engaged. After letting it slip, it becomes awkward as she covers up by saying the reason is that Kazuya is a better leader than she is. Kazuya just doesn't buy the concept, stating that he'd rather marry for love. Lissia asks if there isn't a chance that they eventually fall in love, hypothetically, but we all know her little secret. Just then, Aisha speaks up, asking how long she has to pretend she's asleep. Maybe she was asleep and the cringe woke her. Kazuya is flexing his magical skills, expressing his desire to level up as he's barely proficient with it when he gets alerted to a visitor. It is Halbert's father, Lissia, and a new character. No, wait, it's Halbert. Bro has been beaten so bad it seems like he had a failed surgery. Pinatas pity him. Halbert's father, Glaive, apologizes for his son's behavior. Although Kazuya isn't offended and doesn't see the need for the Gomu Gomu no techniques, Glaive pulled on Halbert for it. Kazuya is cool and tries to keep the situation at ease. He proceeds to seize the opportunity to assign Kaeda to work under Ludwin, considering her impressive skill set. Kaeda is surprised and takes the role happily. Kazuya also assigns Halbert to the Forbidden Army, where he'll be close to Kaeda. With that settled, Glaive asks to speak with Kazuya and requests privacy. With everybody out of the room, he proceeds. The information is sensitive enough to make Kazuya shaken a whole lot. The magic in this world is divided into 6 elements: basic avatar fire, air, water, earth stuff, and light and darkness in addition. Each element has its own attacks, and light is basically for healing. Darkness, though, has to do with every other form of magic that isn't categorized under any of these other elements. Magic can be imbued into weapons to enhance their performance. There are mages as well, who are more grounded magic users. When recruited, they are assigned according to their elements: fire for the army, wind for the air force, water for the navy, earth for the Forbidden Army, which reports to the king. The light elementals, medics, are shared equally among all branches. Kazuya is in luck since the earth elementals are at his disposal, and he has some of them already working on his civil engineering projects. Kazuya's powers fall under dark magic, as it isn't categorized under any other element. Putting his powers to action, he decides to go on an adventure using his human version of Kung Fu Panda, Mascot, a puppet under the influence of his magic. He joins a guild, and although they're weirded out, some seem to be familiar with him as he has made quite an impression, as rumors tell. Amongst them is Juno, who is skeptical about Mascot joining them. The team takes him along anyway, as their mission is just at a beginner level. As they proceed with their mission, mission, they encounter a couple of monsters in the passageways, and Mascot clears with ease. The quest seems easy as they haven't encountered anything that was a threat, but just as they're relaxed, Juno senses something ahead and calls everyone to a halt. It's a big monster up ahead, and not only are they at an advantage, not having any means to hurt it, but its fluids are also acidic, like if Shrek weaponizes his bad breath and it yields toxic saliva. They do the only logical thing, which is to skedaddle, like they're trying to escape Turbo Granny. As they run, Mascot trips and falls. I mean, it's understandable, bro is literally the Big Show with more clothes on. Juno goes to his aid, but the monster spews its fluid all over them like it's some desperate Ponzi schemer, trying to spit facts to your face but is basically just spitting. Just then, Mascot goes in front of Juno, blocking the acid away from her. The acid doesn't do much as Kazuya had built some kind of resistance in his puppet. Talk about convenience. They finally make it out of the pathway. There's so much relief as everyone looks like they just got away with messing with John Wick's dog. They're concerned for Mascot, but it seems he's doing alright. Juno seems to have bonded with Mascot and can even communicate. It's like having a conversation with Groot. After the day's work, Kazuya cleans up Mascot, and as he's still in the process, Lisha comes in. She figures out Mascot is the adventurer who has been viral of late and questions Kazuya's purpose for using Mascot in these adventures. He says that he wanted to see what the underground passages look like, but deep down, he also just enjoys the adventures. At the throne room, Kazuya speaks before the ministers. He praises them for their hard work, especially in the generation of capital for the next project, Project Venetonova, giving a speech so uplifting it could make Grumpy from Snow White go upbeat. He had mentioned earlier to Lisha about the construction of Venetonova, a port that will be beneficial to the economy as it'll allow for smooth transportation of products. Kazuya continues his speech, moving the grown men to tears. To show his appreciation, he offers them 5 days off along with the option to take a bottle of wine each from the cellar as compensation for the absence of medals due to the kingdom's tight budget. These old-timers rejoice like 9-year-olds. Lisha talks to Kazuya about being overly generous, which he admits he may have been a little carried away by lack of sleep. The men deserved it though, as does he deserve some rest since he has been overworking. Although Lisha understands that Kazuya is working hard, she also needs him to touch some grass, as no one can replace him in case things go south. Kazuya chuckles, noting that they can always summon another hero. With that, he drifts off to sleep, clearly exhausted. Lissia, speaking to Kazuya in his unconscious state, admits that she would prefer him over any other hero. The next day, Kazuya arrives at the location for the Venetonova project with Lissia and Aisha. As he scouts the area, he wonders why a really perfect spot has gone unused. They arrive at the setup camp and Ludwin welcomes them. Kazuya asks about the progress, but Ludwin has unfortunate news to share. After they get into the tent, Ludwin reports that there are people who are against the construction taking place in that location as they believe this might incur the wrath of Kaijin, a monster, as it's its territory. Although it's most likely superstition, it is said that whenever a house is built in a sea god's territory, monsters come out and swallow them whole. Kazuya asks to see the old man who told Ludwin about everything, and Ludwin agrees to take him there. As they arrive, the old man isn't very welcoming until he realizes that Kazuya is the king. The discussion begins after they're inside, and the old man pleads with Kazuya not to go on with the project, literally crying as he explains why. Kazuya sounds rather positive and asks the old man to indicate where the Kaijin's territory spans. At the end of the day, Kazuya deduces that it is superstition. However, he feels the wrath of the sea god is a tsunami. Ludwin mentions that he hasn't heard of the area being struck by a tsunami, and Kazuya explains that the intervals of the incident may be very far apart. Kazuya also made findings about how wide the area usually affected by the tsunami is and indicated it on the map. That being said, he isn't abandoning the project, but rather changing the location. Ludwin doesn't understand why Kazuya is making adjustments for a tsunami that may not happen anytime soon, but Kazuya explains it is best to be prepared. Earthquakes occur in the area occasionally according to his findings, and earthquakes can cause a tsunami. Kazuya doesn't explain the process that leads to tsunamis, as he wants to avoid further confusion. He advises that if an earthquake occurs, residents should evacuate to higher ground. The planning continues, and everything seems like it'll be a whole lot of work, but Kazuya is positive. Lissia and Aisha only watch, making comments about how dedicated Kazuya is. Just then, Lissia asks if Aisha likes Kazuya. Without hesitation, Aisha affirms, mentioning that she respects him a great deal. Lissia requests that they continue to support Kazuya. This world, although not technologically advanced, has ships and mounted cannons, almost as if they are preparing for Luffy and the Great Pirate Era. Although this is odd, technology is developed based on necessity, so it doesn't matter. However, Kazuya intends to work on his own community glow-ups. Construction is in full swing, and the builders are working hard at it. Halbert doesn't understand why the Forbidden Army, whose job is to protect the kingdom, is involved in the construction, and Kaida explains that the original builders were short-handed. It's a road construction to connect throughout the city, starting from the port. Halbert's complaint stops when he tastes heaven, which is basically a burger with a different name. Kaida explains that Kazuya invented it, and used the spices the Mystic Wolves manufactured. Since gaining refuge in the kingdom, the Mystic Wolves specialized in spice making. The roads have provided better food transportation, which allows them to enjoy fresh foods, and Kaida says they are making a good contribution to food shortages. They all have Kazuya to thank for this, and Kaida admires Kazuya's brilliance as well as his foresight. As they continue discussing, Kazuya shows up unexpectedly with Lissia as well. Both Kaida and Halbert are surprised, but Halbert does too much with the stiff salute. Kazuya doesn't want all that and prefers they communicate on a more informal basis. Halbert doesn't comply with this, not until Kazuya makes it in order. They walk down the construction site, basically inspecting, and Lisha mentions she has never wondered how roads are built despite how many times she has walked on them. Kazuya suggests that since they are inspecting, Lisha should observe and learn a thing or two. As expected, she has questions about the materials used for the road to the lamp station along it. As everything is made clear to Lisha, Kazuya mentions the trees planted by the road, allowing Aisha to do the explaining. These are warding trees, monster-repelling trees. They give off off frequencies that are unpleasant to monsters and wild animals, preventing them from trespassing. It's from Aisha's hometown, and there, they plant these trees around to prevent monster invasions. Adopting this system, Kazuya explains that they can't plant the trees too close as it may endanger the ecosystem, and adds a bunch of other things that make him look like Albert Einstein Jr. Just then, a message bird arrives bringing news to Aisha. Her reaction upon reading this letter isn't positive, and Kazuya asks what it's about. Aisha says the message is from her father, the chief of the Dark Elves. According to him, there was a landslide in their town, with about half the town caught in it and multiple casualties as well as missing persons. Aisha is distraught. Kazuya takes a moment to think and quickly comes up with something. After finding out how much manpower they have, Kazuya orders that they go to aid Aisha's town. Aisha is about to protest when Kazuya insists on helping. Gratitude is written all over Aisha's face. As strangers to the town, Kazuya needs Aisha, who is conversant with the place, to accompany them. That being said, he asks Kaeda to assemble the army and then sends Lisha to the capital to request a rescue team as well as supplies. However, it'll take a long while for them to get to the destination, which isn't good as the casualties would increase as time passes. Kazuya is brainstorming in a way to move everyone to the location quickly when a monster walks by, flicking on his idea switch. They all load up on carriages and the monsters pull them, headed for Aisha's hometown. They eventually arrive at the town where they meet Aisha's father, Wodan. He respectfully introduces himself, and as usual, Kazuya asks that they leave out the formalities and go straight to the point. Wodan briefs them on what has happened and also indicates the affected areas on the map. Kazuya asks for a list of the missing persons to help with the search and rescue. He also requests that people stand watch over the mountain to observe and report anything unusual, as a second landslide would be disastrous. Aisha volunteers to go for the mountain watch, and Wodan vouches for her that she's very conversant with the area and, as such, is perfect for the mission. She's to scout the area with other people who are used to the area as well. They are about to set out, and Kazuya gives instructions. He orders the men to listen closely to hear the survivors and swiftly rescue them. But in case of another incident, he asks that they clear the area for their lives. They begin the expedition, and everyone is into it. Kazuya, out of nowhere, hears a survivor and alerts the team. They hastily dig out and take the victim to safety. Halbert is curious how Kayuza was able to hear the survivor's voice, and Kayuza explains that he used a wooden rat controlled by his magic to scout the areas he can't reach. Just then, Kazuya throws up as his wooden mouse just came across the remains of unalived people. At the end of the day, all of the missing persons are found, although some are in rough shape. Wodan is grateful for Kazuya's help, as it could have been a lot worse had he not come to their aid. Just then, Aisha rushes in with news that Lissia has arrived with aid. Their excitement about this news is trampled upon by some emo man. He's all gloomy, saying it's too late. Kazuya goes to the man, who is sobbing, and assures him that the relief team, which arrived with Lissia, would provide a lot of help to the survivors, like tending wounds, even though they didn't arrive in time for the search. But the man points out that the good deeds won't bring back the victims who, unfortunately, didn't make it. Wodan quickly rebukes the man, apologizes to Kazuya on behalf of the man, who is his younger brother Robthor. Arie, Robthor, sadly lost his wife in the incident, and his only daughter is barely alive. Robthor bursts out lamenting, and Wodan tries to put him together, asking him not to blame anyone, himself as well. Wodan asks Robthor to mourn his wife's passing and pray for his daughter's recovery, and Robthor breaks down in tears. Looks like we're getting another Punisher installation. As soon as he's done crying, of course, he'll probably be fighting nature instead of taking down crime syndicates. This is difficult for Kazuya to watch, and he exits the room, and Aisha joins him. She mentions that Robthor opposed the thinning idea, wondering if things would have ended differently if he hadn't. Kazuya states that the complete avoidance of the incident isn't certain, as it would happen anyway with prolonged rainfall. According to him, this was bad luck. He does have a couple of ideas to keep this sort of incident in check, as nothing can completely stop it. Kazuya feels that claiming to protect nature is a mistake, as nature isn't weak to even need protecting. He says nature goes to a constant state of destruction and rebirth, and they only try to keep it in a state that best suits them. Aisha stays behind as Kazuya and the soldier head back after helping out. Lissia ponders the fact that she wasn't able to help, but Kazuya reminds her of her role in going to the capital for help, stating that everyone gave their all. However, he does feel like he's the one who didn't do anything. Despite Lissia trying to point out that he contributed a lot, Kazuya says his role as the king isn't to help after the incident, but to plan ahead. Lissia still doesn't agree with him talking down on his contribution to the rescue. He continues to criticize his inability to be fully prepared, mentioning several aspects that are lacking. He's really upset, and it's giving an instance where the brilliant kid scored a little lower than a perfect score and is throwing tantrums. Juna, for some reason, walks politely down the palace hallways to Kazuya's office. After being granted permission to go in by Kayuza, she meets him going through some paperwork whilst chilling in bed. Juna says she heard from Lissia that he has hardly been sleeping, and Kayuza says he has a lot on his mind and can't sleep, although he's tired. Yuna walks in and sits on the bed like a pro therapist, asking Kayuza to lie down. After he complies, she says it's okay for him to show weakness, and mentions she's there to support him. She isn't done with all she has to say when she realizes this dude snoozed. She whispers the last bit anyway, saying that she'll be the one to conceal his weakness if the princess is the one who draws out his strength. She ends with a song. The three dukes have a meeting. Castor and Excel argue while Carmine just sits there quietly. Castor is passionate about taking down Kazuya, notwithstanding Kazuya being a hero and actually doing good, while Excel is fine with Kazuya remaining as long as her city benefits. She also mentions that other nations are waiting for them to cross swords so they can have an opening. This is about Amadonia in particular, and Castor mentions that they sent a note promising to support them if they need to overthrow Kazuya. Excel states her suspicion that they probably offer the same help to Kazuya and are hoping that both parties bring each other down. That being said, she asks Carmine for his thoughts. Carmine's decision to go against Kazuya is simply because Kazuya has let go of a lot of things without a second thought. He casts aside traditions and history, ministers and even soldiers if they're inefficient. Looks like someone has a nostalgia problem. Excel confronts him about being after the throne, but Castor corrects that Carmine isn't about becoming king. Carmine explains that after taking down and driving out Kazuya, he'll have the previous king reclaim the throne. Excel asks Castor to sever his ties with his children in case things go south, but Castor feels insulted that Excel even considers the possibility of him losing to Kazuya. Just then, Carla, Castor's daughter, barges in. She states that she'll side with her father if he's committed to fighting. Excel rebukes her resolve, asking if she wishes to be a traitor at a young age. To her, Kazuya usurped the throne, and she isn't ready to clarify the mindset as she vows to carry out the task of taking down Kazuya. Gaius, the ruler of Amadonia, receives a reply from Carmine. Carmine has taken a stand, and Gaius shares the information with his son Julius. He mentions that Carmine is getting old and losing his touch, since if Carmine were at his prime, he would have been wise enough not to have accepted their invitation. Gaius makes the decision to send reinforcements to both parties in the kingdom, and both he and his son grin at the evil plan. Baroa, Gaui's daughter, laments about her father's and brother's decision. For a brief moment, she fantasizes about how nice it must be at Elfrieden and admits she is jealous of their purse. The word purse lingers on her mind briefly before her head cooks up something worthy of a grin. Akuya gives a positive report about the food situation being largely sorted out. It's now time to take the next step, which is against the Dukes. Although he doesn't like this, he understands the necessity. After thinking, he determines to go through with it, declaring it like he's trying to transform into a Power Ranger. Gaius stands before his army giving one of those pre-war speeches. He announces they are going to invade the kingdom and take back what was taken from them, and the crowd is more confused than energized. Just then a man calls Gauss's attention. It's a subordinate and Minister Gatsby. Gatsby pleads with the king to reconsider invading Elfrieden, as starting a new war would worsen the starvation. Gaius quietly walks down to Gatsby and stumps him. He rants, stating that unlike Elfrieden, which has been improving greatly since Kazuya's regime, they have nothing to show for it. Gatsby continues pleading for a change of heart, also mentioning other negative effects it'll have on Amadonia. This time, Gaius quietly grabs his sword ready for a quick draw. Fortunately, Julius intervenes and tries to settle the situation. Gatsby isn't satisfied, but Gaius silences him and strips him of his title as financial minister. As Gatsby takes his leave, he meets Roroa, who's all upbeat while he's all beat up. She notices the work of art that her father so graciously adorned Gatsby with, but Gatsby assures her that he's alright. That being said, she asks Gatsby to join her head out, and he hasn't the slightest lie where they're headed. At Kazuya's office, he reveals to Lisha that he's going to have a meeting with the three dukes and says there's something he needs to ask her before then. The meeting is in session and they all introduce themselves. Kazuya speaks with confidence, stating his final declaration that if they continue to disobey him, he'll have no other choice but to recognize them as traitors. That being said, he asks for their thoughts on it. Excel speaks up, requesting to ask a question. She asks what Kazuya plans on doing with the three duchies, and Kazuya says he has no intentions of taking any action against the three duchies themselves if they do as he says. She also asks about his plans for their armed forces, and Kazuya mentions that he plans on joining them with the Forbidden Army, abolishing their ability to keep each of their armed forces within the three duchies. Castor points out the effect of Kazuya's plan in the case of a bad ruler who exerts racial supremacy. Their forefathers put these forces in place to ensure that in such a scenario, the king would be taken down. Kazuya states that while that was okay in times of peace, they need to centralize their power to ensure a more solid force in this now unstable world. Castor asks about a scenario when the centralized power gets corrupt, and Kazuya, to the surprise of everyone, sincerely approves that Castor takes his life if such ever happens. Excel has a final question, and it's about what would become of her city, Lagoon City, which is the original port. Kazuya explains that the new city is both a port and a tourist spot. As such, Lagoon City would remain the main naval port. Excel, who is satisfied with the responses, finally swears fealty to Kazuya. Kazuya is delighted and asks the same from Castor, but Castor's decision still stands. The fact that the previous king gave up the throne without a word to any of the dukes doesn't sit right with him, nor does it with Kazuya, who doesn't understand why the king did that either. Castor declares that he's siding with Carmine, but mentions that the ones siding with Carmine are 100 members of the Red Dragon City Knights, adding that the remaining Air Force members would be neutral, decision that seems to be putting the chances of his possible defeat into consideration. Kazuya understands and goes over to Carmine. Kazuya doesn't bother asking for a change of mind. He's only curious as to what stirred Carmine up this bad. So Carmine replies that it's his pride as a warrior. He wants to decide the fate of the Elfrieden based on his own judgment. Kazuya calls him a fool, but Carmine just sees that as a criterion for being a warrior. It is settled and both dukes are against Kazuya. To ensure that the fight doesn't drag on or take away innocent lives, Kazuya proposes that if any of them gets captured or unalived, the forces under their command would move to the other, and they all agree. Just before Carmine takes his leave, Lisha calls his attention and then pulls a Sakura move, cutting her hair off to the surprise of everyone. She points out that she would fight on Kazuya's side. Carmine understands this and takes his leave, as does Castor. Kazuya apologizes to Excel for not being able to convince Castor, but she understands, as Castor's mind was already made up. Kazuya requests to speak with Yuna and thanks her for the connection with Excel. He's happy to have them on his side, as well as Lisha and the others. Gaius is leading his army of 30,000 men to invade through the mountain pass. Hakuya informs Kazuya about this development. Gaius arrives at the city of Altamura. The Lord of Altamura, Weist, humbly offers their grains in exchange for mercy. When Gaius asks him to open the city's gates, Weist requests some time. He explains that the city is divided into factions, those who won't fight and those who insist on fighting. He needs time to unite everyone's opinions. Julius advises his father to agree to Weist's request, and Gaius accepts. He guarantees the safety of the people if they surrender their stronghold. Weist thanks him and hurries away, but Gaius plans to take the city once the gates are opened. He believes Kazuya is occupied enough with Carmine's 40,000 men to send reinforcements to Altamura. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, at Randall, Carmine's soldiers are launching all manner of assaults on the fortress walls while the Forbidden Army defends it. Kazuya had sent them to build and protect the fortress. Soon, the enemy pulls out the big guns and starts firing at the walls. Kaede panics. Her anti-magic reinforcement only works against magic and flames, so the walls cannot withstand the barrage. While both she and Halbert are cowering, Sir strides past them and destroys incoming cannonballs with his arrows. He briefly introduces himself and returns to work, mentioning how they rescued his daughter during the forest disaster, but he didn't get the chance to thank them. Ludwin bravely leads the palace guards with the sole aim of destroying the enemy cannons. Beowulf informs Carmine that the cannons have all been destroyed. The noblemen are displeased and begin questioning Carmine until he reminds them who is boss. He blames them for taking the cannons out there to get destroyed, then explains that Kazuya is obviously not at the fortress, so they need to lure him out using the fortress soldiers. He advises the noblemen to take the next day off with their soldiers to rest, as the fight will not conclude in a day or two. After they leave, Carmine asks Beowulf if everything is ready. Beowulf affirms that it is, and Carmine is satisfied. Meanwhile, Gaius has been waiting all day. Julius begins to issue an order for an attack when they hear war cries from the city. Gaius is confused. Weist returns and immediately apologizes, explaining that it has been difficult to persuade the people. Gaius, however, is not having this and draws his sword, ready to make an example of Weist. But Julius cautions him, reminding that they would lose many soldiers fighting against such determined men. Weist agrees with Julius and tries to appease Gaius with bags of gold dust. Gaius accepts the gold dust but asks what Weist wants in return. Weist requests more time until noon the next day, when the shadow of the nearby tree reaches the bags of gold dust. He frantically promises to deliver this time. Julius supports the request, and Gaius agrees to it. Inside the stronghold, Weist asks Excel if their actions are truly for the best. He thinks that much gold dust could have hired an entire division of mercenaries. Excel replies that mercenaries can easily switch sides because of money, and says that time is her only ally. Kazuya had sent her to Altamura, and she is waiting for him to make his move, otherwise they will all perish in the stronghold. At Randall Castle, everyone has finished dinner and is already dozing off, feeling low in energy. Kaede gets quite comfy. She's concerned about the war though and asks Halbert to protect her. The next day, the war resumes, but the soldier count is less than expected. Kaede wonders if they are changing formations. Meanwhile, Gaius is growing impatient and orders his soldiers to prepare for an attack. Halbert notices Duke Castor's air force approaching. The night before, Castor had evacuated the citizens in preparation for war. He realizes Kazuya's strength, but it's too late. He instructs Tolman to reject requests from other air force units asking to join him. When Tolman asks if he isn't joining forces with Duke Carmine, Castor replies that he doesn't mind fighting alongside him, but refuses to be associated with those corrupt nobles. Tolman informs him that the Forbidden Army is currently fighting against Carmine's men. He also mentions that it's unlikely Kazuya is on the scene, but he seems to lack the manpower to send to Castor. Castor wonders if Kazuya is disregarding him, feeling annoyed. He thinks Kazuya should first defeat him and take his air force to confront Carmine. Although disappointed, he believes Kazuya may come at them with a move they aren't expecting. Just then, Carla enters and informs Castor that Kazuya's force has been spotted. It's just one battleship though, but this ship has been designed to come on land. Kazuya sends a message to Castor, promising to stomp the Red Dragon City. The ship starts firing at the city. Castor is amused and impressed, thinking Kazuya would make a good king. However, he refuses to do something as disgraceful as backing down. Kazuya accepts Castor's decision. Castor immediately orders Carla to silence the ship. Carla leads the team of Air Force soldiers to attack the ship, with the main goal of capturing Kazuya. To their surprise, the ship pulls up repeating bolt throwers, which are fixed-base defensive weapons whose bullets just follow you. The soldiers manage to evade the attacks. They have a new idea: to go low. Carla reminds them to take Kazuya alive, knowing that Licio will be upset if they harm him. Their strategy works as they avoid the ship's shots and successfully destroy its tires and weapons. However, they soon discover that the ship is empty and only contains a puppet hand that controls the cannons. Realizing they've been fooled, Carla quickly orders everyone to return to the castle. Kazuya had lured the Air Force away from Castor, who is inside the city. Inside the castle, Castor is surprised to see Kazuya and a few others. He asks how they got in, and when Kazuya tells him, Castor realizes that they already have the castle's blueprint. Since it's their first time meeting face to face, they introduce themselves. Castor then states that Tolman has nothing to do with the matter, and if he ends up being defeated, Kazuya can entrust the Air Force to Tolman, who will serve him exceptionally well. Kazuya gives Castor another chance to surrender, but the proud man refuses. He chooses to fight, and Aisha is ready to defend. Castor wants to fight Kazuya, but Kazuya insists that a regular guy like him can't measure up to Castor. Aisha initiates the fight but doesn't catch Castor off guard. They clash swords for a while, and Aisha's strength surprises Castor. He almost overpowers her, but the puppet intervenes and Licia jumps out from it, hitting Castor with her ice sword attack. Aisha lands the final blow, and Castor falls to the ground, defeated. Licia looks at him with pity, but he asks her to fix her face as he regrets nothing. He then asks if Kazuya is a good king. Licia affirms that he's a good king to her, and despite what some might say, she wants him to be king. She even declares she would fight her father if he tries to reclaim the throne. Talk about the things we do for love. Suddenly, Kazuya hears an explosion from the ship. Aware that the Air Force will be returning, he instructs Licia to put a slave collar on Castor. The collar's master is set as Kazuya. If Castor attempts to harm him, the collar will tighten, and his head will roll automatically. Castor understands this and doesn't resist. Carla bursts through the window like a hero, but she's shocked to see her father's state. She's angry and wants to fight, but Castor stops her. Licia reminds her that if she tries to kill Kazuya, her father will suffer the consequences too. Carla reluctantly gives up and receives her own special necklace. Kazuya grants Tolman a temporary position as the Air Force general and asks him to command the Air Force under the authority of the Forbidden Army. Tolman accepts but asks about Castor and Carla's fate. Kazuya replies that their cases will be reviewed once the fighting ends. Tolman doesn't press the issue further. further. Kazuya then orders him to announce the battle's outcome. He is now ready to face Carmine. As they use the air carriage, everyone is quiet until Lisha breaks the silence to say nice things about Carla to Kazuya. He realizes she's pleading for Carla's life. Carla says she doesn't need to. Kazuya had already offered them enough chances that they refused. She considers herself a warrior and is prepared for any outcome. Kazuya wishes she had channeled that resilience into something better. When Halbert and Kato see the Air Force, they're sure they'll win. Tolman commands the Air Force to destroy all enemy weapons. Kazuya and Halbert greet each other as friends. They both completed their missions well and soon start arguing about which was more difficult. Carla is surprised at their friendship. The noblemen go to Carmine to report the betrayal from the Air Forces and express the need for a new strategy. Carmine remains calm, realizing they have already lost the battle. The noblemen refuse to accept this, and when one of them suggests using villagers as human shields, Carmine becomes furious, but they see no issue with it. Carmine signals for slave collars to be placed on all the noblemen. It turns out he wasn't on their side all along. Now that he has completed his plan, he feels fulfilled and willingly puts a collar on himself as well. He then asks Beowulf to send a messenger to the Forbidden Army with their surrender, ready to accept full responsibility. Kazuya praises Ludwin for a job well done and instructs him to assemble his troops and prepare to move out, declaring that the fighting is over for here. True to his word, a soldier informs them of a white flag. Everyone is surprised and curious about how Kazuya knew. Carmine is in his office admiring a bottle of wine given to him by former King Albert when Beowulf rushes in to inform him that Kazuya isn't entering the city. Instead, he's leading the Forbidden Army westward. He has also ordered Carmine's army to regroup and join the Forbidden Army. Carmine finally understands Kazuya's threat. He's impressed and toasts to the young rulers of Elfrieden. On their flight, Carla questions what is happening, and they explain the situation to her. Duke Carmine had arranged everything. Duchess Excel had been on their side from the beginning thanks to her granddaughter Juna. They were unsure how the other dukes would react, but Halbert's father, Glaive, approached Kazuya and informed him of Carmine's plan to gather all the corrupt noblemen and eliminate them. Glaive also revealed that the properties Kazuya seized were not the only ones. Many noblemen still had hidden funds. Carmine's strategy was to force them to exhaust these funds by hiring mercenaries from Zem. After capturing both the noblemen and the mercenaries, he planned to demand for the money as ransom in exchange for their release. Kazuya realized that Carmine is quite wise and that they should work together. However, Glaive emphasized that Carmine was entrusting the future to Kazuya. Kazuya decided to keep this information to himself to avoid jeopardizing Carmine's plan, only revealing it to Lycia when the situation was nearly resolved. Carla commented that if Carmine was risking his life, then her collar was not a big deal. Meanwhile, in Altamura, Weist's time is up. Julius is about to command an attack when they spot Excel on the wall. Gaius is surprised to see her there, especially since it takes up to 3 days to travel from her city to this one. Julius eventually realized that she must have already been in Altamura before the conference call. Julius suspects it's a trap and urges a retreat, but his proud father refuses to back down. Excel creates a large crystal cast for Kazuya to address the people, broadcasting his message throughout the city. Kazuya introduces himself, making sure to mention the dukes he has defeated. He expresses his anger over Gaius's trickery and shares the details with the public. He then openly declares war against Amadonia. Feeling insulted, Gaius listens as Kazuya announces his intention to conquer the Amadonian capital, Van. Kazuya promises that Gaius will face the consequences for his aggression against his territory. Gaius immediately orders his troops to return to Van. Sebastian informs Roroa that her father is heading back. Just then, Gatsby runs in, reporting that Gaius and his men have arrived at the plains of the city, but they aren't unharmed. As Roroa suspected, they had been ambushed in Goldoa Valley by Kazuya's forces. However, Gaius, Julius, and a few others managed to escape. It turns out that Juno was our Wonder Woman leading the attack. According to Gatsby, out of 30,000 soldiers, only 15,000 made it out of the valley. Gaius tried to gather men from the surrounding areas and managed to increase their number to 25,000. However, by the time they reached the plains, Kazuya's forces had already filled the area with banners of the Elfrieden Kingdom. Gaius thinks the city has fallen, but Julius points out that the castle hasn't fallen yet. Gaius commands his troops to drive the enemy soldiers away and advance toward the castle. Kazuya learns that the entire Amadonian army is advancing at once, but he had already anticipated this. He instructs a soldier to wave the flag twice. When Ludwin sees this signal, he understands the formation to follow and gives the necessary orders to each group. As the battle begins, Gaius stays back, dishing out motivations. Kazuya's people aren't here to play. They're launching attacks as if auditioning to join the Avengers. Meanwhile, Carla notices that Kazuya's mind is elsewhere. He explains that he feels uncomfortable remaining at the camp. Although he is king, he does not want anyone to be harmed, including himself. Gaius tells Julius to escape, but Julius hesitates, unwilling to leave. Gaius knows that the war is already lost and doesn't want his bloodline to end. He insists that Julius go. Reluctantly, Julius leaves, allowing Gaius to refocus on the battle, ready to show his pride. Kazuya is informed that Gaius is approaching the main camp. He quickly reassigns Carla's collar's master to be Lycia in case he falls during the battle. He also yields the throne to Lycia if that happens. Carla refuses to deliver such a message and pleads with Kazuya to instruct her to strike Gaius down instead. Not wanting to see Lycia get hurt, Kazuya orders her to do it and she immediately complies. Ludwin sees Gaius and shoots him down, only to realize it's a body double. The real Gaius is attacked by Carla. Gaius is determined to take Kazuya's head and refuses a mere girl to stand in his way. Just then, the puppet intervenes. Kazuya arrives on the battlefield. They argue over territory, and Gaius loses his temper and tries to attack, but the puppet prevents him. Kazuya instructs Carla to ignite the puppet. When she does, it explodes. Kazuya rushes to check on Carla, but she asks him to leave. If he is harmed, Lycia will be heartbroken. As the smoke clears, they are shocked to see Gaius still standing. The fire has done a number on him though. He attempts to continue fighting, but the archers turn him into a porcupine. With his last bit of strength, strength, Gaius throws his sword at Kazuya, but even that fails. Defeated, he collapses to the ground. Roroa receives the news of her father's death. She's sad and asks to be left alone. Kazuya takes the throne as the new Lord of Van. Lisha comments on how fancy the place is, while Kazuya can only think of how many other things could have been done with that money. It turns out he had been planning to take over Amadonia since their quest near the border when they saw Amadonian soldiers. He knew something was up and evacuated nearby villages. Ludwin reports that Julius fled west and mentions another princess who left with the finance minister and other key officials. Kazuya realizes the absence of officials will be a problem, so he sends word to Hakuya to send some bureaucrats. Pancho reports that, aside from minimal capital and food supplies, the city has an abundance of weapons. Kazuya instructs that the surplus weapons be sold to raise funds and that food in the castle be rationed until stability returns. He considers shipping an additional food from the Elfrieden kingdom if necessary. Glaive informs Kazuya that the soldiers are in good condition, suggesting they could conquer all of Amadonia at that pace. However, Kazuya is not interested in capturing any territory beyond Van. He says the Empire is definitely coming because of the changes in border. He orders the post-war cleanup to be done quickly before the Empire takes action. As Ludwin walks through the city, he notices the citizens hiding. They have been harboring resentment toward Elfrieden all these years. Kazuya recognizes the need to uplifting their spirits and calls for Juna. When she appears in her navy uniform, Kazuya praises how good she looks, which leaves Lycia feeling jealous. Noticing this, he goes straight to business. Kazuya wants Juna to execute the next step of their plan, hosting an entertainment show for the people. He also recruits Aisha, who feels nervous about her new look, until Kazuya offers her a compliment, and she feels better. After the news, it's time for the real entertainment. Kazuya and Aisha are hosting a musical performance. The crowd is surprised to see the kind of man who defeated Gaius. A little girl performs first, followed by Juna, our star. The people of Amadonia are happy. Then, a soldier sings the Amadonian anthem as a form of rebellion, but Kazuya does not mind. He says that it is not a crime to sing another country's song. The Grand Chaos Empire occupies the largest territory on the continent. It has an unmatched population, military strength, technology, and wealth. So, when the Demon Lord's domain was formed and a surge of monsters emerged, the Grand Chaos Empire was chosen to lead mankind. Maria Euphoria is the current leader of the empire. She made the Mankind Declaration to maintain peace among all people. Due to her beautiful appearance and kind-heartedness towards all races, rich and poor alike, she is known as the Saint of the Empire. At the Grand Chaos Empire, Jean reports to her sister Maria. She is preparing to leave for Van with an army to meet Kazuya and negotiate for Van's return. Maria understands that Amadonia is to blame for the situation but cannot tolerate any violations of the Mankind Declaration, as it would damage the Empire's prestige. Maria has heard that Kazuya is a brilliant man and believes that if Jean can discuss matters with him, he will be reasonable. However, Jean fears that they will clash. She says that Maria is an idealist while Kazuya is a realist, putting them at odds with each other. Meanwhile, in Van, Kazuya and Lycia neck deep in work. They're constantly receiving requests from the citizens for various fun activities. Although Kazuya almost regrets introducing them to leisure, the happiness it brings to the people is evident as the city thrives. Roroa is secretly back in the city with Gatsby, pleased to see the people enjoying their freedom after her father's rule. Then she returns to her stealthy mode, focused on her mission. Hakuya informs Kazuya that an army of 50,000 men from the Grand Chaos Empire has begun their march. Exhausted, Kazuya barely has a moment's rest when Pancho arrives to show him a flower with roots that are a high-value food product. Kazuya recognizes it. However, there's a problem. It can't easily be harvested because the flower pollens have an hallucinatory effect, but Pancho always delivers, so he has a solution. He found a village that employs orangutans to harvest the roots because the animals enjoy getting tipsy. Pancho has sent Tomoe to negotiate with the orangutans in Amadonia, offering them barrels of drinks in exchange for their help. Pleased with this plan, Kazuya asks Pancho to start increasing production of the roots immediately. Pancho prepares lily stew with the roots and serves it for free to the people, while Serena shares lily root dumplings as well. Tomoe is out with Juna and Kazuya, disguised. Their guards are also in disguise. Juna suggests buying a dress for Tomoe, leading them to a shop where they meet Sebastian. I guess this is his retirement after Gaius's failure. Tomoe is excited but initially hesitant. Kazuya reminds her that they are basically siblings, and she soon finds a dress she loves. Kazuya spots a pair of shoes he wants to buy for Tomoe. Sebastian suggests he save the shoes for later. From Sebastian's manner, Kazuya guesses that he has military experience, but Sebastian denies it, claiming he actually worked for some distinguished individuals until recently, one of whom was a charming yet cunning little devil. Just then, Roroa sneezes loudly, prompting Gatsby to wonder why a lady would sneeze that way. Roroa explains that sneezing once means someone is talking about you, while sneezing twice means that someone has fallen for you. She waits for a second sneeze. Delusional. Tomoe puts on her new dress and Kazuya is delighted. As they head back, he offers to carry the bag, but Tomoe refuses. Then he reveals the new shoes he bought for her, which makes her even more excited. He also gives Juna a hairpin he bought, along with gifts for Lisha and Aisha. They stroll through the plaza, stopping at a food stall to buy snacks and take a break to eat. Tomoe soon falls asleep. Suddenly, Jean appears. As she introduces herself, Juna is ready to defend Kazuya. However, Jean is not there to fight. She simply wants to confirm what she has heard about him. They engage in conversation, and Jean appreciates Kazuya's work with the gemstone broadcast, although he brushes it off as normal where he comes from. Jean apologizes for the hero summoning. Kazuya already knew that the Empire had no need for a hero. They were merely being considerate of Elfrieden, which couldn't provide financial aid for the war effort. They didn't even think the summoning would work. They continued chatting for a while, and Kazuya says that he has found a family here that he wants to protect. They agree to negotiate when they meet again, and Jean leaves. Kazuya knows that the negotiations will be difficult. At home, Tomoe happily shows her new dress to Lisha, while Kazuya gifts Aisha a lipstick which she loves. Lycia Lucia is already feeling jealous, but she brightens up when Kazuya gives her a necklace. It fits perfectly. Kazuya feels content with his life and is determined to protect his newfound family.